Welcome everyone back to another episode of Q&A with Sharon's son George. I was my mother's caregiver after she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, she passed on 1/1/2020, so we started Together for Sharon.com in her memory and to advocate today for a cure for all those still battling PD and their families, because no one is ever alone in this fight for a cure. Today's guest is somebody I've known for some time, but I needed her on today badly because I need to smile a little. I thought about it just before we came on. It's tough someday. I did a few already today, and sometimes you have your own health, you have your work, family, and then you kind of get drained and tired, but then you realize the purpose and that we all have something meaningful that we need to continue on. And that's why I do this in memory of my mother, but for all those still battling and for the families and communities. So I want to welcome you, Margot, today. It's an honor to finally have you on the show. And, we've been through a lot already together, which is all positive. And today, I hope it can get even one person out there listening to smile, laugh a little, and just kind of forget PD for at least for a moment.
Well, I hope so too. And it's wonderful to actually meet you in Zoom time today, George. I'm such a fan of your work and inspired by what you've been doing.
Thanks. It means the world. Maybe we could start by telling us a little bit. I know your background, but a little bit more, and what got you into the world of Parkinson's awareness.
Okay. Well, my father, Ivan Escott Jr., was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 1998. And I became very involved in Parkinson's at that point, became involved in a local association, actually got on the board, went to a lot of meetings. And at that time, I was doing a lot of workshops on the healing power of humor, play, and laughter. And I would present some of these to the association, and my dad would always come and have fun. And then in 2002, because of his Parkinson's, my husband and I became his primary care partners. We all lived together, and I'm so grateful that I had that time to be with my father and get to know him better. His disease progressed to Lewy body, the last year or so of his disease, which is a more advanced form of Parkinson's. And I was challenged at times, but he was so much fun, and he was just a wonderful old school gentleman. My mom had passed many years before then, and he loved my husband, and my husband loved him, and we had a lot of laughs and a lot of good times together. And if I have a moment, I'll share one story. Years ago, I was on that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And later on, years later, they were re-showing the show. They were replaying parts of the show. And one night, we're all sitting around the living room, my dad and my husband and myself. And the announcer says, and tomorrow night on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Margot Escott. And my dad turned to me and said, I hope you do better this time.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that, and we send our love and support to you, your husband, the whole family. Today, we're going to dedicate a memory of your father, because I feel together, not only our voice is so much stronger, but we never let those we've lost due to Parkinson's ever be forgotten. So thanks for sharing that. And I think that it's important to have a discussion today because laughter is so important. Obviously, you're the expert, so I'm not the comedian on this side, but we've had Phil Jerky on the show. We've had some other incredible Dan, also improv, and some really amazing people. And one thing I will share is this is about you and your journey, but my mother also had a tough struggle. It sounds like our parents had a lot of similarities due to Parkinson's. I don't understand still today, 5 years later, why it progressed so quickly in the last 4 years out of something, a horror show, which, we don't try to get everyone sad today. We want to make everyone laugh. But one funny thing I always talk about is Sundays. My mother's favorite time. She come over. She has three grandchildren, three of my children, and the whole family would gather. We'd have like 10 people almost, and we'd fight, like literally fight over where to order from, like what a fast food. And when it was going through it, it was horrible. It was not good. Then today I look back and laugh a little because I miss that now. So that's why it's important that we keep their memory alive, keep talking about it, but also try to make a few people out there today smile.
Absolutely. And George, one thing I'd like to point out is my dad was diagnosed in 1998, but looking back, I think he had it way before then. but his symptoms were very mild. It was under control and nobody was noticing. In fact, a friend of his that was another golfer, a doctor, noticed him walking and said, Ivan, I think you need to get checked out for Parkinson's. So people may have it much longer than before they're actually told they have it.
Yeah, I agree. My mother the same way. She had it for 7 years, and all I heard was the word Parkinson. I didn't even know it was a disease. We don't know if she wasn't sure how it would progress, or the doctor still didn't understand it at the time, or we went to 15, experts, and they just all said, "You're not going to die of Parkinson's, you die with it." So our whole family kind of realized we'd have to help her through the disease, but never dreamed that at only age 69 she wouldn't be with us. So a lot of misconceptions, misdiagnoses, not early enough diagnosis. But today, again, we just have to keep the hope that others don't have to battle like that. And I felt very alone as a caregiver. And I just realized in shock in a way that my mother never met somebody who had Parkinson's. And that's kind of tough because today, meeting you, I mean, I imagine I would say if I had a little FaceTime phone back then with you and her, she would have loved you and we would have had a few laughs. But we can only keep going forward. I did want to start a little bit now by sharing a few beautiful things. The first one, I want to thank you. You might recognize this beautiful young lady. I want to thank you for we've known each other over a year, which goes so quickly. But if everyone has time, you can go to togetherforsharon.com. You can search for Margaret and you can see a beautiful, in-depth, much more time on her bio, her background, how to reach out. So please visit that. Now, with the drum roll for this is the most important thing is I want everyone, if you can, to please go to improvforwellness.com and please subscribe. Doesn't only takes a minute, it's free. I always say no excuse not to subscribe, but we can even do it here. See, I do it a second time as we talk. But maybe you can now take us through not just the website, but a lot of the work. And we never have time to realize how incredible your background is as a social worker because it's so important to talk about the comedy and the improv, but maybe you can also discuss a little bit on, the website, your background, and Improv for Wellness.
Well, thank you. And I got a master's in social work in 1983 at New York University, but came to Florida very quickly after that. And my parents had a winter home here. And for many, many years, I practiced psychotherapy. Starting around 1985, I was giving workshops on the healing power of humor, play, and wellness. And we're coming up to some pictures of my Parkinsonians and improv for therapists. That's a great picture on my left. And so I had trained in something years ago called the New Games, and New Games were win-win games for all populations. So when I started my initial workshops, which I did for like 30 years, I was doing new games, play, and also talking about the cognitive powers that humor and laughter have for us. Well, when I discovered improv, my world exploded. Improv games and theater was very close to what I had learned at the new games, but and you also see I have a blog there. But the improv, when I started learning it, I realized right away, George, it was therapeutic. I could see ways that playing improv, in fact, there's many therapists around the world now that are using improv and what they call the applied improv method. And I've been specifically trained in improv and therapy. Now, it was back almost 8 or 9 years ago, I guess, when I realized that improv could be great for people with Parkinson's. At the time, I didn't know anybody else that was doing it. And so I started a group through the local Parkinson's Association. And then we moved to a theater. And we always had between 8 and 10 people with Parkinson's and care partners. And the people with Parkinson's, we did have people with other disorders like PSP, Lou Gehrig's. And when we met in person, the care partners were usually there with them and playing as well. And one care partner told me after a few years that it really improved the communication between she and her husband. And of course, I loved hearing that. So I also was teaching groups at a local theater. Well, in 2020, we had the great pandemic. That's when I took my group online. And since then, we meet every Saturday, and I also have a group that meets on Wednesday, Improv for Parkinson's and Care Partners. And my Saturday group has been meeting online ever since 2020, but some of them were with me when I started over 8 years ago. So they've been playing a long time. One of the sad things is, tragically, of course, we lose some players during that time. But they've given me so many gifts. And there is currently research, evidence-based research out there that shows what some of the benefits are of improv, for example, on anxiety and depression, for cognitive improvement, and for Parkinson's, there's a lot of different benefits. You might want to show my podcast. Or you saw the podcast already, George?
I think Naples is lucky to have because we're in South Florida, so we're neighbors, but I think we need you here in South Florida.
Thank you. And I've been blessed with having many great professional improvisers and fantastic people around the world on my podcast. I'm very grateful for that. And at the top there, the most recent one was Larry Gifford with PD Avengers. And Larry's, I bet you've talked to Larry. He's great. So,
Yeah, I mean, you're doing such amazing things that I think there's an important need for. Also, I'm from New York originally, so we're family there too.
yeah, yeah.
It's very important though that people realize, unfortunately, a lot of individuals go through Parkinson's, whether caregiver or someone diagnosed, and it gets to be tough. Like you mentioned, mental health is something that's now kind of finally become an important topic in the U.S. Just the last decade, whether it's in the world of law enforcement or Parkinson, but I think it's something that we can't just ignore, and being able to cope and deal with tougher situations through comedy and improv is very important. My wife and I had the honor to go to the live improv show that's on TV, the one that Colin, I forgot his name,
Oh,
Colin,
Montgomery. Yeah, I've played with him online.
yeah, they're great. So that was a lot of fun, but it's very important to talk about things, but also use the area of comedy and improv to get a smile. There are certain moments I remember my mother where it was really tough, as you probably had with your father towards the end, the last few years. I write about in my book, but being able to see her very smile, just even for a moment, lights the world up for so many, including myself. And those are the memories that Parkinson's disease can never take from us. I also wanted to thank you, and everyone, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, which I did. We got to get this to 1 million subscribers, so that's my goal. And you can see here some incredible videos and things, and then
Yeah,
also, yeah,
I'm
please.
going to interrupt you. I wanted to point out to the one with the lady in the sunglasses in black and white. That is a show that my Saturday morning group did. It was called Film Noir Improv, and we used the genre of film noir films to play this show. And we have a team T-shirt that says Pippi, Parkinson's inspired people with Parkinson's inspired people playing improv. And there's a great player right there. We've had at least 4 live shows. We do them live on Facebook and then have them on the YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I love them and I share them as much as we can everywhere around the world. I think that, again, as long as we work together, we can really reach more people. I think
Yes.
that's the key. And also, your Facebook too. We're friends, but you do some incredible things here as well. So please, everyone, here's an event maybe you can touch on that is coming. It's actually still ongoing. I recommend everyone to reach out and sign up. And now there's no excuse because it's virtual. I always you can even do
Right.
it from home, and I think it's great too that caregivers can also play a big role and be a part of it.
One thing I was going to come back to was when you mentioned mental health. For many years, I worked as a home health social worker. I had a private practice for many years, and I would supplement that by doing home health and various other what we call PRN jobs. And I would go to the home of somebody who was very, very ill. I also worked for a local hospice for 5 years. So I would go to the home of somebody who was very ill, and their partner, maybe the ill person was in their 80s and their partner was even older, and they couldn't drive, they couldn't get out and get things, and the transportation here isn't that great here in Naples. And they were really at risk. I remember one day I went in and this gentleman that had to be about 87 told me he had just gotten off the ladder. He was on the roof of their condo fixing something. And so they're often the unseen and invisible care partners that really need help as well, because it's such a stressful situation, as we well know.
And what was the one moment in your life that kind of clicked and said, I need to help make people smile, or, offered even the opportunity to help them through the tougher times?
I think I've always had that in my life. I think that's why I took these things called the new games. And then in the early 80s, when I first got to Naples, I went to a convention that had Norman Cousins, who wrote Anatomy of an Illness, and many other famous people who were talking about the healing power of laughter and play, and that there's actually chemicals that are released in our bodies when we're laughing that combat the stress hormones when we're in the fight or flight. And it just got me inspired. And I like to talk, as you can see. So I started doing these workshops. And in improv, I do want to note it's not really improv comedy, because you don't have to be funny to do improv. You just like to have fun. And we play games and exercises. A lot of them were developed by a woman named Viola Spolin, who was an actor and social worker during the Depression, and she wrote the first book that is one of our Bibles in improv. And so there are exercises and games to increase your awareness. And maybe at some point we could talk about the games we just played this morning to increase your personal awareness and your space and your sense of joy.
And I do want everyone to note, and I'm not the expert, that you don't have to have a background or experience. You just have to have some positiveness in you, or just to be able to give it a try. I think some people might kind of stray away, at least I did, watching the shows on TV when they go through the audience and you're like, don't call on me, but that's not how it is. And they didn't call on us, but it's not like a regular comedy club like you said, where they pick on everyone. I think
Yeah.
that unfortunately, improv might get the bad rap if you kind of show and tie it to the comedy shows where you go, you're watching it fun, but then the comedian starts bashing everybody. They might be having fun, but that's not always fun for the audience.
And the only requirement, like I said, is to want to have some fun and to be able to be silly and take some risks. Like we have a game that's called Tigers, and we go like this: Tigers, rah, and then Martians, beep, 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 and salesmen, how do you do? How do you do? And that's one that we do as a icebreaker or a warm-up exercise, or sometimes a closing exercise. And you have to be willing to look silly. That's all I can say. And we're
Well,
all acting silly, so.
if everyone here knows, I'll do anything for Parkinson's awareness and a cure. And we just dressed up. I was Hulk Hogan for Halloween. We had a show for Parkinson's awareness. So,
Great, great.
you'll have to check that out. And then I have so many other things planned, but anything we could do to, advocate together, I always encourage it. So I appreciate all that you do and share. Wanted to shift a little now to a little bit more about you, if that's okay. By starting off with, can you list 3 words that describe who you are?
3 words.
Sometimes we want more. It's not easy in just 3. We could do
Compa-
4. You could do 4 since it's improv 4. Well,
Compassionate, empathic, joyful, and curious.
dang, I love that. You got the 4 exception because we're improv 4. Well, what is a one moment or most memorable moment that stands out through most of your work with awareness so far that you can share?
I think the connection between other people with Parkinson's who felt maybe somewhat isolated before they came into my classes. When my dad had Parkinson's, a lot of his golf buddies didn't come to visit. They didn't want to see him, as he was different than he used to be. And that was very sad. 1 or 2 friends would come, but not a lot of them. And so the thing that really has affected me is the camaraderie and the friendships that have developed. When we were doing it here locally, they'd go out to lunch And now online, they get together via Zoom or email or the phone, and they connect with each other. And it's so important to have that connection with others who really understand what we're going through.
Yeah, I mean, you just brought up something that's so important that a lot of people don't talk about. I had the same, I mean, we would need several shows together to talk about so many different topics, but my mother, and again, hopefully they're not listening, but some of our best friends over 10 years vanished when my mother got very, very sick. And today I'm still not sure why, but you mentioned a few reasons. It's kind of heartbreaking though when you do see that, because you think in the time of need, that's when they would show up. I always found that kind of fascinating in an odd way, also kind of sad. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm gonna probably have to write a blog about it because it's a topic I don't think people discuss a lot of the time. So thanks for sharing that, because that's an intimate, tough topic to talk about.
Yeah, it's almost as if people are afraid it's contagious or
Yeah.
something. And I know for years, my mother died of cancer over 40 years ago. And I know for her, cancer was like a dirty word. You didn't say it back then. And it's different, it's unknown. Um,
Sorry to hear about your mom too. My mother's favorite idol was Fran Drescher with Cancer Schmancer, and that's another example I believe of comedy
yes,
cause for cancer. So you can see
yes.
comedy, improv, they all really don't. They're not just for one area. They're for everybody around the world for so many things, not just Parkinson's. And again, I think you're doing some incredibly inspiring things. Here's a tougher question. We'll still make it fun somehow. Who helps you during times of struggle? Because obviously you're dealing with individuals sometime that, it's struggling for them. It's tough. My mother went through it. I did as a caregiver. But I just want to give a moment to thank you, your family, and people behind the scenes too that aren't the face of Improv for Wellness, but I think also need to be thanked. So who helps you during times of struggle? And also, as you know, we're both caregivers. What tips can you give those listening to who are caregivers?
Well, first of all, my husband, Norman Johnston, we've been married 33 years, and I couldn't have taken care of my father without him. He was instrumental in taking care of my father with me. And I think my father even liked him better than me sometimes. And then we are Shetland sheepdog lovers, and we've always had a little Shetland Sheltie around us, and my dogs give me a lot of comfort. I also have an improv mentor that I speak with basically on a weekly basis who helps me get through times that I might be struggling. And that's a shout out to someone named Jay Suko. And what was the other part of the question, George?
Well, first, are the dogs that are near you? Because you can say hi. I love them.
Oh, no, his name is Winston. He's
Uh,
taking a
oh,
nap right
well,
now.
then we send our love and also to everybody there and the mentors
Yeah.
and all the staff of Improv for Wellness. The second part was just, are there any tips you could give caregivers who might be listening?
I like to call them and ourselves care partners.
Excellent.
Caregivers kind of brings up a different image for me. And the first thing is to recognize you're not alone and you don't have to do it alone. There are Parkinson's associations and Parkinson's, MS, MLS, cancer. There are support groups everywhere, and it's okay to ask for help. Some people are very private. I don't want to talk about this with strangers, but once you dip your foot in the water of a support group, and many of them are led by folks like myself, licensed social workers and mental health counselors, once you take that first step, it'll become easier to jump all the way in. And you'll see how much your experience, no matter how sad or overwhelmed or confused you might be, your experience can help others. And many of the groups that are, especially in the Parkinson's groups I'm aware of, are led by people who are care partners of people with PD.
Thank you. Yeah, I wrote an article about that. There's care partners, caregivers, caretakers. I just think as long as you're caring, you're in. So I
Right,
was
that's right.
wondering, the next area is who's your hero and inspiration?
Um, well, my dad, um, my dad, he He was a captain of a bombardier plane in World War II, and he flew like 36 missions over Germany. And then he became a captain with Pan Am, and my mother was a stewardess with Pan Am. We said stewardess back then. That's how they met. And he was very generous, and everybody loved him. Everybody just loved my dad. And like I said, he had a great sense of humor. Sorry. He had a
Sorry.
great sense of
Do you have his
he
picture by nearby or no picture?
yeah, let me find one. I'll find one as we're talking and bring it up, okay? Let me see if I can find it, and I can put it in the chat for us, okay?
That'd be great. And again, today is the show is in his memory. And as you're looking, it's amazing how we're both so similar. I felt the same way about my mother, and she'll always be my hero. The only reason I do this today is in her memory. So I think the same for you and your father.
It absolutely is. And I've got one or two pictures I can show here. Just a minute, let me get another one.
You might, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we actually started out, I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to reshare my screen, and anyone listening who has lost a loved one due to Parkinson's, we've added a special area under our journey, and you click in memory and you'll see a special area for individuals who lost a loved one due to Parkinson's. So after we're done, maybe I could talk to you about that. And I met,
Oh,
people
yeah.
like Jana Reno I met, and a lot of beautiful stories, and Muhammad Ali's daughter. But I'm writing an actual book on losing a loved one due to Parkinson's. So we're going to make
Oh,
sure your father, all the beautiful people I've come in touch with who lost a loved one are included. And if you are out there listening, lost a loved one, feel free to reach out to either of us, because again, you're not alone, and we'll never let your loved one be forgotten. So thank you.
here, my first picture I'm sharing is a picture of my dad in his younger years. He was quite handsome.
I love it.
And then I don't know if you can share screen or not and show the audience the picture. And then the other picture is how he looked. He was 87 years old when he passed away. That's
Hopefully,
my dad in his younger years. He went to Indiana University, a big Hoosier. I was proud of that.
beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. And again, we'll have to talk a little after, but a few final areas. This one you'll love. If you were asked to write a script to a movie about your life story, what would you call it?
Parkinson's and me.
That's a good one. And then the final question is, if you could leave the Parkinson's community today with some words of encouragement, what would they be?
Every day we're fighting for a cure. The National Parkinson's Act was passed. So many researchers are out there looking for a way to end this tragic disease. Hope is the most important thing you can have. Don't give up your hope. Keep hoping and keep smiling, because it really does help you.
No, I second that and really appreciate it. I do have a little message for you, but before I do that, please everyone again go to improvforwellness.com. Please support Margaret and all the incredible things that she does. We'll definitely, I believe we won't be ending this conversation until there's a cure. So please share it. But a little message for you, everyone listening. We love you. We support you. We care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I, along with my amazing special guest here, will advocate for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I always say I'm just getting started, because even though I'm not, when we met and I saw the incredible and inspiring work you did, kind of re-energizes me to keep fighting. And I'll always fight right by your side in memory of your father and all those still battling today, all the families, caregivers, and in memory of our loved ones, your father and my mother. We have to find a cure. And I do agree with the hope, but it's also action. So please sign up for Improv for Wellness. There's no excuse. It's virtual too. You can do it right from home. You don't have to be in beautiful Florida or New York. And just really, again, grateful for your time and friendship, and look forward to so much more together in this fight for a cure. Thank you again.
And George, I'm inviting you to come to our Saturday classes every Saturday at 11 a.m. I'm going to send you the link. I'd like you to drop in and play with us.
Yeah, I love that, because we actually this morning I dropped into a live event for a Bike Box Project, Team Fox and Michael J. Fox. So it was
Yeah.
I usually come for 10 minutes, but we get to show what it's like to be live around the world, because these shows are great because we get to talk, but showing the magic of what you're doing is even more beautiful. So hopefully 2025, we can definitely do that. I appreciate it. So thank you again. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, please share this. Please support all that Improv for Wellness does. And this has been another episode of Q&A with Sharon's son, George. The message and the goals cannot stop. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep sharing. And it doesn't take much more than a few moments to subscribe to Improv for Wellness. I just did it live with you. And again, I'm so grateful for everyone's time. We send our love and support, and you're never alone in this fight. We'll be right by your side until there's a cure at our doorsteps. Thanks again, everyone.